Marcus Sullivan had learned one truth in Fallujah that never left him. When silence falls over a crowded room, someone is about to die. The dishwater scalded his hands as he scrubbed the last of the dinner plates, steam rising from the industrial sink in thick clouds. Through the small service window, he could see the dining room of Aria, crystal chandeliers throwing fractured light across white tablecloths, the muted laughter of Manhattan's elite mixing with the clink of silverware on bone china. Friday night, 8:30. The rhythm of wealth. His eyes tracked to the corner table automatically. Victoria Brennan sat alone, tablet propped against a wine glass, her fingers scrolling through what looked like contracts. CEO of Brennan Industries at 32, worth more than most small countries, and she ate here every Friday like clockwork. Mark had never spoken to her, never needed to. She was part of the furniture, same as the brass coat hooks by the door.
Then the front entrance opened, and the room's temperature dropped. Two bodyguards, her bodyguards, the ones who usually sat at the bar nursing sparkling water, collapsed in perfect synchronization. Not dramatic, not violent. They simply folded at the knees and went down like marionettes with cut strings. Three men in black suits stepped over them, moving with the fluid precision of people who'd rehearsed this exact sequence 100 times. Mark's hands stopped moving. The plate he'd been scrubbing slipped back into the water. The lead man had a scar shaped like a V carved into his neck, the kind of wound that spoke of close combat and bad luck. The other two fanned out, covering angles, blocking exits. Diners froze mid-conversation, forks hovering in empty air. A woman in pearls opened her mouth to scream, but nothing came out. The scarred man, Vince, Mark would learn later, walked straight to Victoria Brennan's table and stood there. Didn't speak. Didn't draw a weapon, just smiled with all his teeth showing and none of his eyes participating. Mark was already moving before his brain caught up to his body. He pushed through the kitchen doors, apron still dripping, dishwater soaking through his shirt. The dining room stretched out before him like a frozen tableau, every face turned toward the corner table where three predators circled one woman. "Leave her alone." His voice cut through the silence, not loud but carrying, deep enough to make heads turn. Vince rotated slowly, taking in the dishwasher with theatrical disbelief. Up close, Mark could see the scar tissue on the man's knuckles, the way his suit jacket hung wrong on the left side, compensating for a shoulder holster. "Look what crawled out of the kitchen. A hero in grease stains." The words came out casual, practiced, a man used to intimidation as a tool. "Go back to your sink. This is private business between Ms. Brennan and certain interested parties. Walk away, and maybe you still have a job tomorrow."
Mark didn't answer. His eyes swept the room instead, cataloging weapons that weren't weapons. The heavy ceramic water pitcher on the nearest table, the stack of dinner plates on the bussing cart, the cast-iron serving pan on the tableside burner. Distance, angles, trajectories. His hands hung loose at his sides. "I said..." Vince never finished the sentence. The second man lunged first, telegraphing the move with a shift of his shoulders. Mark snatched the top plate from the bussing cart and sent it spinning through the air like a discus, every ounce of his 190 pounds behind the throw. It caught the man square in the temple with a sound like a mallet hitting clay. He dropped without a word, skull meeting marble floor in a second sharper crack. The third man's hand was already inside his jacket, fingers closing on gunmetal. Mark kicked a chair into his path, sending him stumbling, then closed the distance in 2 strides. He caught the man's wrist mid-draw, twisted until tendons popped, and drove his knee into the solar plexus. The gun clattered to the floor. Mark scooped it up, ejected the magazine, and threw both pieces in opposite directions, muscle memory from a life he'd tried to bury. Vince came at him then, no more talking, just raw violence. A haymaker aimed at Mark's jaw. Mark brought up the cast-iron pan from the service cart, blocking the punch with a clang that made diners flinch. The impact traveled up Vince's arm, bones meeting immovable metal. He roared, more anger than pain, and swung again.
Mark sidestepped, reversed his grip, and slammed the pan's flat surface into Vince's ribs. The air rushed out of the man's lungs in a wet gasp. Vince staggered, reaching inside his jacket with his offhand. Mark didn't give him time. He drove his shoulder into Vince's chest, pinning him against a decorative marble column, using the man's own momentum to spin him face first into the stone. Vince's hand shot out in desperation, fingers tangling in the thin silver chain around Mark's neck. The chain snapped with a sharp ping. Something small and metallic went flying, skittering across the floor toward Victoria Brennan's table. A pendant. Half of a silver dollar, edges worn smooth by 19 years of contact with skin. Mark had carried it through 3 deployments and 8 years of running. Now it lay on imported Italian marble, gleaming under chandelier light. Vince slid down the column, eyes unfocused. Mark stood over him, breathing hard, the broken chain dangling from his collar. Around him, the dining room remained frozen, 50 witnesses to a 30-second eruption of violence that would replay in their minds for months. Sirens wailed in the distance, growing louder. Mark turned toward the kitchen doors marked staff only. He moved fast, not running, but not wasting motion either. Through the service corridor, past the walk-in freezer, into the cramped employee break room where his daughter sat cross-legged on the folding chair, crayons scattered across the table. Zoe looked up from her drawing, a family of bears standing in front of a cabin, the sun a yellow spiral in the corner. "Daddy?" 8 years old, dark eyes too perceptive for her age, braids tied with purple ribbons. She wore the winter coat he'd bought at Goodwill last month, already too small across the shoulders. Mark scooped her into his arms, one hand cradling her head against his chest so she wouldn't see the dining room wreckage. "We're playing the quiet game, baby. Don't say anything until I tell you it's okay." She nodded against his shoulder, fingers gripping his shirt. He grabbed his jacket from the hook and pushed through the back exit into the service alley. Cold November air hit them, carrying the smell of garbage and exhaust. The sirens were close now, maybe 2 blocks away. Mark shifted Zoe's weight and started walking, not toward the main street where police cars would converge, but deeper into the warren of service alleys that threaded through Midtown. He knew these passages the way he knew the forest trails around his grandfather's cabin. Every turn memorized, every dead end mapped, every camera blind spot cataloged. Behind them, red and blue lights painted the alley walls in strobing patterns. They were 3 blocks away when Mark finally let himself breathe. Victoria Brennan stood in the center of the ruined dining room, her tablet forgotten on the table, and stared at the small piece of metal on the floor. The sounds of chaos washed over her. Detective Harris barking orders, paramedics loading unconscious men onto gurneys, witnesses giving contradictory statements, but none of it reached her. She bent down, designer heels crunching on broken china, and picked up the pendant. Half of a silver dollar. The break wasn't clean. It had been snapped by force, probably with pliers, the edges rough and uneven. Someone had drilled a small hole near the top, threaded it with a chain that was now broken. The surface was worn almost smooth, the date barely visible. 1964. Her world tilted. Not here. Not in the restaurant with police and witnesses and her carefully maintained public face. She straightened, closing her fingers around the metal, feeling its weight press into her palm. "Miss Brennan?" Detective Harris stood in front of her, 50s, intelligent eyes and a weathered face. He held a small notepad, pen poised. "I need to ask you some questions about what happened." Victoria's CEO mask slid into place automatically, the one that had closed billion-dollar deals and stared down hostile board members. "Of course, Detective." "These men, do you know why they targeted you?" She did. Ronan Ashworth's face flashed through her mind, that predatory smile he wore in boardrooms when he knew he had leverage.
The Ethel Red acquisition, $800 million, and control of defense AI contracts. She was winning the bidding war, and Ronan Ashworth didn't lose gracefully. I'm in a competitive business environment. This could be corporate intimidation. I have enemies. Harris wrote something down. We've identified the suspects. Contract muscle out of Newark. They're not talking yet, but we'll find out who hired. Now, about the man who intervened. I didn't see him clearly. The lie came out smooth, practiced. Harris's eyes sharpened. Multiple witnesses say a kitchen worker took down 3 armed men using dishware and a frying pan. That's not something you forget. Everything happened very fast. I was in shock. By the time I looked up, he was gone. Harris let the silence stretch, an interview technique meant to make people fill empty air with truth. Victoria had used it herself in negotiations. She met his gaze and waited. Finally, he flipped his notepad closed. All right, Miss Brennan. But if you remember anything else, call me. That man might have saved your life. We need to make sure he's safe, too. Witnesses who get involved in situations like this sometimes become targets themselves. I understand. After Harris moved away to coordinate with his team, Victoria allowed herself one moment of weakness. She opened her hand and looked at the pendant again. Then she pulled out her phone and made a call. Ryan Cole answered on the first ring. I need you, now. Her head of security, former Delta Force, 15 years protecting her father before James died, now protecting her, heard something in her voice that made him skip the questions. I'm 10 minutes out. Victoria ended the call and walked to the restaurant's back office, away from the chaos. She locked the door, sat down in the manager's chair, and let the memory take her. 6 years ago, Walter Reed Medical Center, the sterile smell of antiseptic and approaching death. Her father lying in a hospital bed that looked too small for a man who'd built an empire with his bare hands, cancer eating him from the inside out while he tried to smile through morphine haze. James Brennan had pressed something into her palm, his grip surprisingly strong for someone 3 weeks from death. The other half of a silver dollar.
The man who holds this piece. His voice had been papery, worn down to whispers. He saved my life in Iraq. Ramadi, November 2006. I was 46. He was barely old enough to legally drink. Combat medic. Our Humvee hit an IED. I was pinned under wreckage with my femoral artery pumping blood into the sand. He ran through enemy fire to reach me. 43 minutes he kept me alive under an RPG barrage that should have killed us both. Never got his full name. Just a nickname. Doc. Never saw him after the medevac. But I owe him everything, Tori. This family owes him everything. James had closed her fingers around the coin. If you ever find him, our debt is his to collect. Promise me. She'd promised. Then her father died, and the coin went into her safe, and life moved on because it always did. The debt remained theoretical, a ghost story from a war she'd never fought. Now the ghost had a face. The man who'd dismantled 3 professionals with kitchen equipment, who'd moved with the controlled violence of someone who'd been trained to kill and chosen not to, who'd looked at her table for exactly half a second before stepping into the line of fire. He was the hero from her father's war stories. Victoria spread both halves of the coin on the desk. They fit together perfectly, the break line matching like a puzzle designed by fate. A knock on the door interrupted her spiral. It's Ryan. She unlocked it. Her head of security filled the doorframe, 6'3" of disciplined muscle in a charcoal suit. His eyes swept the office out of habit, checking corners, exits, threat vectors. Then he focused on her face, and something there made him close the door behind him. What happened? Victoria picked up both pieces of the coin and held them out. Find him. The Greyhound bus smelled like stale coffee and recycled air. Mark sat near the back,
Zoe curled against his side, her breathing finally evening out into sleep. The city lights streaked past the window, Manhattan giving way to the Bronx fading into suburbs, suburbs dissolving into the dark spine of upstate New York. His neck felt wrong where the chain had broken. Phantom weight, muscle memory of carrying something for so long it became part of his body. Gone now, left behind in a restaurant full of witnesses and cameras. Stupid. Sloppy. 8 years of careful invisibility destroyed in 30 seconds of instinct. Zoe shifted against him, making small sounds in her sleep. Mark adjusted his arm around her shoulders, careful not to wake her. She'd asked only one question when they'd boarded the bus. "Are we going on an adventure?" He'd lied and said yes, because the truth? They were running. Again. Always running. Would have made her cry. The phone he'd bought with cash at a bodega near Port Authority sat in his pocket, still in its plastic packaging. Untraceable, disposable. The kind of device people used when they didn't want to be found. He had 17 of them stashed in various locations across 3 states. Part of the infrastructure of a life built on worst-case scenarios. His reflection in the bus window looked back at him. 41 years old, deep brown skin, the kind of face that most people's eyes slid past without registering. Invisible, forgettable, safe. Except now he wasn't. The memory of the restaurant played on loop behind his eyes. Victoria Brennan's face, that split second of recognition in her eyes when the pendant hit the floor. Had she seen it? Had she understood? His hand went automatically to his jacket pocket, fingers finding the small orange prescription bottle. He pulled it out, held it up to the window light, and counted the pills inside. 6. Maybe 7 if he was miscounting in the dark. Zoe needed one every 12 hours. 12 pills meant 6 days. They had 6 pills. The math was simple and unforgiving. Her congenital heart condition, atrial septal defect, the cardiologist had called it, using words that meant her heart had a hole in it, required daily medication. Miss a dose and her blood pressure could spike. Miss 3 and they'd be in an ER answering questions about insurance and identification and why a single father was traveling with his daughter without proper medical records. Questions led to scrutiny. Scrutiny led to discovery. Discovery led to the kind of attention that got people killed. Mark closed his eyes and let his head rest against the cold glass. The steady rhythm of the bus engine thrummed through his skull, monotonous and almost soothing. He'd run through the scenarios 1,000 times. Best case, they made it to Pine Brook, held up in his grandfather's old cabin, and he figured out how to get more medication without using his real name. Worst case? Zoe stirred, pressing closer. Her hand found his and squeezed. "Daddy, are you okay?" He opened his eyes. She was looking up at him, dark eyes reflecting the passing lights. "I'm fine, baby. Go back to sleep." "You're thinking too loud." Despite everything, he almost smiled. She was too perceptive, had been since she was 3 years old and started finishing his sentences. Her mother's intelligence, her mother's intuition. Sarah had been gone 7 years now. Drunk driver, wrong place, wrong time. The kind of random violence that proved the universe didn't care about fair. But pieces of her lived on in their daughter. "Just planning our adventure." "Where are we going?" "Somewhere safe, with trees and a lake. You'll like it." "Will we stay there forever?" The question hit harder than Vince's punches had. Forever. The concept seemed alien, a luxury for people whose lives hadn't been interrupted by war and loss and the necessity of constant motion. For a while, until it's safe to come back. Safe from what? He didn't have a good answer. Safe from his past? Safe from the attention he'd drawn? safe from the systems that would ask questions he couldn't answer. All of it. None of it. The truth was too complicated for an 8-year-old and too raw for him to speak aloud. Just some bad people I used to know. But they won't find us where we're going. Zoe seemed to accept this, her head settling back against his shoulder. Within minutes, her breathing deepened again. Mark envied her ability to trust him absolutely, to believe that her father could protect her from anything. He used to believe that too. The bus droned north through the darkness, carrying them toward the Adirondacks, and the only place Mark had ever felt truly safe. Ryan Cole stood in the cramped apartment in Brooklyn, breathing through his mouth to avoid the smell of old cooking and mildew. The building superintendent, a woman in her 70s with suspicious eyes and a Yankees cap, watched him from the doorway. "Told you, he moved out 2 years ago, paid in cash every month, never made trouble. Then one day he knocked on my door, said he got a job upstate, handed me the keys. That's all I know." Ryan nodded, scanning the empty apartment. Someone else lived here now, different furniture, different life, but he could still reconstruct Marcus Sullivan from the super's description. Quiet, reliable, invisible. The kind of tenant you forgot existed. Did he mention where upstate? Nope, didn't ask neither. Not my business where tenants go. What about the girl? The super's expression softened fractionally. Sweet kid, quiet like her dad. Drew pictures, left them on the hallway bulletin board sometimes, butterflies and flowers, that kind of thing. Must be 9 or 10 by now. 8, the woman shrugged. Time moves funny when you're old. They gone is all that matters. You gonna tell me why you're looking for them? Ryan pulled out a business card, minimal information, just his name and a phone number, and handed it to her. If he contacts you, or if anyone else comes asking about him, call me. It's important. He in trouble? No, but he might be in danger. The super studied him with the kind of assessment that came from decades of watching people lie to her face. Whatever she saw must have passed muster because she pocketed the card. I'll call if I hear anything, but I won't rat him out to whoever's hunting him. Man paid his rent on time and kept his nose clean. That counts for something. Ryan left the building and stood on the sidewalk, letting the cold November air clear his head. Dead end number 1. He pulled out his phone and started making calls. 3 hours later, he had a name. PS 142, Elementary, Queens. The school registrar was less cooperative than the super, citing privacy laws and proper procedures. Ryan didn't push. Breaking into a school's database was one thing, but doing it in person with witnesses invited complications. Instead, he made one call to a contact in the NYPD Records Division, cashed in a favor that had been aging for 5 years, and had Zoe Sullivan's enrollment records on his phone within 20 minutes. Withdrawn 3 weeks ago. Reason given, family relocation. No forwarding information. Emergency contact, Marcus Sullivan. Phone number, disconnected. Ryan sat in his car outside the school and pulled up the next piece of the puzzle. Facial recognition. The restaurant's security footage had been wiped, professionally, completely, the kind of digital erasure that required expertise and planning. But the building across the street had a traffic camera that caught the service alley. The angle was bad, the resolution worse. But Ryan had software that could work with fragments. He uploaded the grainy footage of Marcus Sullivan carrying his daughter into the alley. The program chewed through the pixels, building a face from incomplete data, then cross-referenced it against every database Ryan had access to. DMV records, social media, employment histories. One hit. Army personnel files. Marcus James Sullivan, Sergeant, 75th Ranger Regiment, combat medic. Service dates, 2004 to 2014. Honorable discharge. Current whereabouts? Unknown. Ryan expanded the file. A service record popped up, dense with military jargon and redacted sections. He skimmed past the technical details and focused on the deployment history. Iraq, 2005 to 2008. Afghanistan, 2010 to 2012. Iraq again, 2013 to 2014. He pulled up the commendations. 3 bronze stars, 1 silver star. The citation for the silver star had been partially redacted, but enough remained to paint a picture. Extraordinary Valor Under Fire, Ramadi, November 2006. Evacuation of wounded personnel under sustained enemy contact. Ramadi, November 2006. Ryan's chest tightened. He scrolled further, looking for the names of the soldiers Sullivan had saved. Most were redacted, but one wasn't. Captain James Brennan. The pieces clicked together with the finality of a rifle bolt sliding home. Marcus Sullivan hadn't just saved Victoria's father. He'd done it in a way that earned him the nation's 3rd highest military honor. And then, 8 years after leaving the army, he'd vanished into civilian obscurity, working as a dishwasher, raising a daughter alone, living under the radar. Ryan dialed Victoria's private line. I found him, or at least who he is. Marcus Sullivan, 41, former Army Ranger medic. Your father wrote his commendation letter personally. On the other end, he heard Victoria's sharp intake of breath. Where is he now? Unknown, but I have a lead. His service record lists next of kin, Eugene Sullivan, grandfather, deceased 2019. Property records show Eugene owned a cabin in the Adirondacks near a town called Pine Brook. How confident are you? 80%. It's remote, isolated, the kind of place someone goes when they want to disappear. If I were him, that's where I'd run. Silence stretched between them. Ryan could almost hear Victoria's tactical mind working through scenarios, weighing risks, calculating outcomes. Go there. Observe only. Don't make contact. If you spook him, he'll disappear and we'll never find him again. Understood. Ryan, when you find him... She paused, and in that pause, Ryan heard something he'd rarely heard from Victoria Brennan. Uncertainty. Make sure he's safe. Whatever he needs, whatever it costs. We owe him that. Ronan Ashworth's office occupied the entire 42nd floor of a glass tower in Midtown, floor-to-ceiling windows offering a view of Manhattan that seemed designed to remind visitors of their insignificance. He stood at those windows now, phone pressed to his ear, listening to Vince make excuses. A dishwasher. You're telling me a man who scrapes plates for minimum wage put you and 2 professionals in the hospital? Vince's voice crackled with defensive anger. He wasn't just a dishwasher, Mr. Ashworth. The way he moved, the way he assessed the room before engaging, that was military training. Special operations, maybe. Ronan's reflection in the glass smiled without humor. 45 years old, Harvard MBA, $3 billion in managed assets, and the instincts of a shark circling wounded prey. The Brennan woman thought she could outbid him for Ethel-Red Technologies? Thought her name and her father's legacy would be enough to win? She was learning otherwise. Tell me about the girl. 8 years old, maybe 9, dark skin, braids. She was in the back office during the incident. He grabbed her and ran the moment sirens started. Ronan turned from the window, phone still pressed to his ear. His desk held 3 monitors displaying real-time financial data, newsfeed, and security footage from 6 locations. He tapped the keyboard and pulled up the police report from ARIA, sanitized for public consumption, but containing enough detail to be useful. The man's name? Working on it. Police don't have him in their system yet, and the restaurant's security footage was wiped. By whom? Unknown. Professional job. Either he did it himself or someone's protecting him. Interesting. Ronan filed that detail away. Find him. I don't care what it costs.
Find the dishwasher and find the girl."
"Yes, sir. May I ask why?"
Because Victoria Brennan protected him.
She lied to police, destroyed evidence, and is using her own resources to track him down. That makes him valuable, and anything valuable to her is leverage to me. Ronan ended the call and pulled up a different file on his computer. Background on Marcus Sullivan, compiled from public records and a few less public sources. Army Ranger, combat medic, honorable discharge. Disappeared from society 8 years ago after his wife died in a traffic accident. Raised his daughter alone, worked cash jobs, left no paper trail. A man who knew how to be invisible. The question was, why? What was Sullivan running from? Or running to? Ronan opened another file, Victoria Brennan's complete dossier, compiled over months of careful observation. Her patterns, her weaknesses, her pressure points. He'd learned early in his career that business wars weren't won in boardrooms. They were won in the margins, the small vulnerabilities that careful people thought they'd hidden. He'd already identified Victoria's primary weakness, her father's legacy. James Brennan had built an empire, yes, but he'd also built it on relationships, on loyalty, on debts paid and favors remembered. Victoria carried that burden like armor and Achilles' heel combined. She felt responsible for her father's promises, his unfinished business, including, apparently, debts to dishwashers who could dismantle security teams with kitchen equipment. Ronan picked up his phone again, this time calling a different number. It rang twice before a voice answered, professional, neutral, expensive. "Creed? I have a job for you. Finding a target and his daughter. The target is trained, experienced, and currently running. I need him located within 72 hours. Parameters? Alive. Both of them. The girl especially. She's leverage. Rate? 50,000 for the location. Another 50 when you deliver them to me." Creed's silence lasted exactly 3 seconds. Long enough to run mental calculations, assess risk versus reward. "Send me everything you have." Ronan forwarded the Sullivan file and ended the call. Then he stood, walked back to the windows, and looked down at the city spread below him like a circuit board. Millions of people reduced to moving lights and patterns. Somewhere in that vast machine, Marcus Sullivan was trying to hide. But hiding required resources, planning, and eventually, mistakes. Everyone made mistakes when they were protecting someone they loved. Ronan's reflection smiled again, and this time, it reached his eyes. The cabin sat 3 miles off the main road, accessible only by a dirt track that disappeared under autumn leaves and optimism. Mark navigated by memory, the truck's headlights catching fragments of familiar landmarks, the lightning-split oak, the stone marker his grandfather had placed to warn of a sharp turn, the wooden bridge over a creek that ran fast and cold even in summer. Zoe had woken an hour ago, pressing her face against the window to watch the forest close in around them. "It's dark here." "That's good. Dark means safe." The lie came easier now, repeated enough times that his mouth formed the words without his brain's permission. The cabin emerged from the tree line like something from a fading photograph. Log walls gone gray with weather, tin roof patched in 3 places, stone chimney leaning slightly to the left but still solid. Eugene Sullivan had built this place in 1975 with his own hands and stubbornness, refusing to retire from the world until the world insisted. He died here 5 years ago, alone, the way he'd wanted. Mark cut the engine and sat in the darkness, listening. The forest made its night sounds, wind through pine branches, distant owl calls, the creek's constant murmur. Nothing human, nothing threatening. "Stay close to me." They approached the cabin together, Mark's hand resting on Zoe's shoulder. The front door's lock had rusted shut years ago. Mark went around back to the window he'd left unlatched during his last visit 3 years ago. It opened with a protest of warped wood.
He boosted Zoe through, then followed. Inside, the cabin smelled of dust and mouse droppings and the particular kind of decay that comes from abandonment. Mark pulled a flashlight from his jacket, one of 6 he kept charged and ready, and swept the beam across familiar geometry. The main room, stone fireplace, his grandfather's chair still sitting exactly where it had been for 40 years. The kitchen area, pump sink, wood stove, the sleeping loft, accessible by a ladder that might or might not still hold weight. Zoe coughed, waving dust from her face. "Is this where you lived when you were little?" "Summers and weekends. My grandfather taught me to fish in the creek, set snare traps, identify animal tracks. Useful skills." "For what?" "For surviving when the world falls apart," he didn't say. "For knowing how to feed yourself when money runs out. For understanding that civilization is a thin membrane stretched over chaos, and sometimes that membrane tears. For adventures." He set about making the cabin habitable, checking the fireplace flue, priming the water pump, lighting the propane stove that still had fuel in its tank. Zoe explored with a child's adaptability, finding her father's old toy box in the corner, pulling out a wooden truck missing 2 wheels and a plastic soldier with 1 arm. "These were yours?" "Long time ago." She arranged them carefully on the floor, creating a narrative he couldn't follow. The soldier guarded the truck. Or maybe the truck was rescuing the soldier. Her imagination filled the gaps his hadn't bothered with. Mark got the fire started, the dry wood his grandfather had stacked years ago still good. Heat began pushing back the November cold. He boiled water on the stove, made instant soup from packets he'd bought at a gas station. They ate in silence, Zoe's eyes heavy with exhaustion. "Bedtime, baby." He carried her up to the loft, tucked her into the sleeping bag he'd brought from their apartment. She curled into it, already half asleep. "Daddy, are we safe now?" The question hung in the darkness above them. "Yes, we're safe here." "Promise?" "Promise." She accepted it, her breathing evening into sleep. Mark descended the ladder and checked the windows, the door, the sight lines from the cabin to the surrounding trees. Defensible, but not perfect. Too many angles, too few exits. If someone came with real intent... He stopped himself. Paranoia was useful, but only to a point. Right now, they needed rest more than they needed defensive positions. Mark pulled the prescription bottle from his pocket and counted the pills again. 6. Definitely 6. Which meant 3 days, maybe 4 if he spaced the doses dangerously far apart. He'd have to risk a run to Albany or Burlington, find an urgent care clinic that would write a prescription without asking too many questions. Use his real name because federal drug laws didn't allow anonymous pediatric prescriptions. Create a paper trail that anyone with access to pharmaceutical databases could follow. The choice wasn't a choice. Zoe's heart condition didn't care about operational security. Mark lay down on his grandfather's old couch, the springs protesting under his weight. Through the window, he could see stars, real stars, not the light-polluted ghosts visible in the city. The Big Dipper hung low on the horizon, Polaris steady to the north. Navigation by ancient light. He closed his eyes and tried not to think about the pendant he'd lost, the chain of events he'd set in motion, the attention he'd drawn from people who had resources and motives, and no reason to let him disappear quietly. Sleep came eventually, but it brought dreams of Ramadi, the smell of burning fuel, the weight of James Brennan's blood-soaked body, the sound of RPGs cooking off in the distance. In the dream, he ran through fire to save a man he'd never met, carrying a debt that hadn't existed yet. He woke before dawn with the certain knowledge that the debt was coming due. The forest held its breath at 2 a.m. when predators moved and prey woke. Mark's eyes snapped open to absolute silence. No wind, no owl calls, No creak sounds filtering through the cabin walls. The fire had burned down to embers, painting the room in shades of orange and black. He rolled off the couch without sound, bare feet finding the floor, every muscle coiling into readiness. Something was wrong with the darkness outside. He moved to the window, staying back from the glass, and let his eyes adjust. The tree line stood 60 yards out, shadows layered on shadows. A flicker of movement caught his attention. Not natural, too deliberate. Then he saw it again, 100 yards to the north. Flashlight beams, carefully shielded but visible when they swept across tree trunks. 4 of them, coming from different directions. Mark's throat went dry. 3 days. They'd had 3 days of safety before the wolves found them. He took the stairs to the loft, 2 at a time, moving fast but quiet. Zoe slept curled in her sleeping bag, one hand tucked under her cheek. He knelt beside her, hand gentle on her shoulder. "Sweetie, wake up. Don't make noise." Her eyes opened, immediately alert in the way children learn when they've practiced this before. She sat up, understanding written in the set of her jaw. 8 years old, and she already knew the drill. The quiet game? The very quiet game. We're leaving right now. He grabbed the emergency pack from the corner. 3 days of food, water purification tablets, first aid kit, the Winchester .30-30 his grandfather had left behind, with 8 rounds in the magazine. Zoe pulled on her shoes, fingers working the laces with shaking hands. Mark shrugged into his jacket, checked the spare ammunition in his pocket, and led her down the ladder. Through the window, the flashlights had closed to 40 yards. Professional. Coordinated. They'd set up a perimeter before moving in, standard small unit tactics for a hostile extraction. Mark counted seconds in his head, maybe 2 minutes before they reached the cabin, less if they had thermal imaging. He moved to the back window, the one facing deeper forest, opened it with aching slowness to avoid creaking hinges, boosted Zoe through first, then followed, pulling the pack after him. The November cold hit like a slap, stealing breath. They ran, not toward the road where vehicles might be waiting, but east into the densest part of the forest, where old-growth pine blocked moonlight and the ground turned treacherous with roots and rocks. Mark knew these woods, had spent summers learning every game trail, every creek crossing, every place where the land could hide you if you moved right. Behind them, shouting erupted. They'd breached the cabin, found it empty. Mark pulled Zoe down behind a fallen log, pressing her against wet bark, his hand over her mouth. She breathed through her nose, eyes wide but not panicked. Good girl. Smart girl. 4 flashlight beams converged on the cabin, then began sweeping outward in an expanding search pattern. Hunting. We're going to move slow and quiet now. Stay right behind me. Step exactly where I step. She nodded against his palm. He released her and started picking their way through the undergrowth, using shadows and terrain, moving when the flashlight beams pointed away, freezing when they swept close. 50 yards. 100. The cabin's lights faded behind them. Then the crack of a rifle shot split the night. The bullet hit a tree 6 inches from Mark's head, bark exploding in a shower of splinters. He grabbed Zoe and dropped, rolling them both into a natural depression in the ground. A second shot followed, closer. They'd spotted the movement or heat signature, or both. Mark's hand found the Winchester, brought it up, but he didn't fire back. Shooting meant revealing position, meant confirming they were armed, meant escalating into a firefight he couldn't win with a child beside him. Stay flat. Don't move. He belly-crawled forward, putting himself between Zoe and the shooters, scanning the trees. Another muzzle flash, north-northwest, maybe 70 yards out. The shooter had night vision, no question. Probably military-grade optics. Mark made a decision that tasted like acid.
He grabbed a fist-sized rock and threw it hard to the south, away from their position. It crashed through branches 20 yards distant. The flashlight beams swung toward the sound, 2 men breaking from the searchline to investigate. The diversion bought them 30 seconds. Mark pulled Zoe up and they ran again, this time abandoning stealth for speed. Branches whipped their faces. Roots tried to trip them. Zoe's breath came in short gasps, but she kept pace, terror giving her legs strength they shouldn't have. The crack of another shot, then another. Suppressing fire meant to flush them into the open or slow them down. Mark's mental map of the forest clicked through options. The creek was 200 yards ahead, running fast and deep this time of year. They could use it to mask their trail, move downstream where the water would hide thermal signatures.
Or they could angle north toward Eagle's Peak, the old fire tower that still stood on the highest point in the county. Defensible ground, limited approaches. His military training said, go to the high ground. His father's instinct said, get Zoe as far from guns as possible. The decision made itself when he heard an engine roar to life somewhere behind them. An ATV or dirt bike capable of covering ground faster than they could run. The hunters were adapting, using mobility to cut off escape routes. Change of plans, baby. We're going up. He altered course, angling northeast towards steeper terrain where vehicles couldn't follow. Zoe stumbled on a root and Mark caught her, kept her moving. Her breathing had turned ragged, the exertion pushing her heart rate into dangerous territory. The pills. She'd taken her last dose 8 hours ago, the rhythm disrupted by the abrupt flight. No time to stop, no time to rest. The engine sounds grew louder, joined by a second vehicle. They were being herded. The ground began to rise, forcing them to use hands and feet to scramble up slopes slick with wet leaves. Mark's shoulder burned where Vince's punch had connected 3 days ago, bruised ribs protesting every deep breath. Behind them, the vehicle engines cut out. Smart. They'd reached the limit of where machinery could go, switching back to foot pursuit. Flashlight beams danced through the trees, closer now. Mark's boot hit something that wasn't earth. Old railroad ties, half buried, marking the beginning of the hiking trail to Eagle's Peak. The fire tower was still 3 miles up, most of it vertical. 3 miles that would take 90 minutes in daylight with a healthy adult. They didn't have 90 minutes. A voice called out through the darkness, amplified and cold. Marcus Sullivan, we know you're out there. We know you have the girl. Stop running and no one gets hurt. Lies wrapped in reasonable tones. Mark had heard that voice before, or voices like it, in a dozen hostile situations where surrender meant execution. He kept climbing. The trail switchbacked up the mountain face, each turn revealing steeper grades. Zoe's legs began to fail, her pace slowing despite her effort. Mark scooped her onto his back, ignoring the protest from his ribs, and pushed harder. The Winchester dug into his shoulder. The emergency pack threatened to unbalance him. More shots rang out, the bullets thudding into trees too close for comfort. They weren't trying to kill, not yet, just to slow, to tire, to force a mistake. Then a different sound cut through the chaos, the sharp crack of a high-powered rifle coming from a completely different direction. One of the flashlight beams behind them went dark, followed by a howl of pain. Someone else was shooting. At the hunters. Mark froze, instinct warring with confusion. The voice that had called out earlier now shouted in fury. The words lost in distance, but the tone clear. They were taking fire from an unknown shooter. The remaining flashlight beams scattered, seeking cover. Opportunity. Mark ran, legs burning, lungs screaming, Zoe's weight on his back feeling like both burden and purpose. The trail steepened impossibly, turning into little more than a root ladder up wet rock. His boots slipped, caught, slipped again. He grabbed exposed roots with his free hand, hauling them upward, inch by desperate inch,
Behind them, more gunfire. A sustained exchange now, two parties engaging each other and temporarily forgetting about their quarry. The mystery shooter was buying them time. But time for what? To reach a fire tower that offered height but no escape? To trap themselves on a mountaintop with hostile forces below? Mark's tactical brain screamed that this was suicide. His father's heart said it was the only option that kept Zoe breathing. They climbed. Ryan Cole lay flat on a granite outcropping 200 yards from the cabin, his Remington 700 sniper rifle resting on a bipod, eye pressed to the thermal scope. He'd been observing for 6 hours, watching the cabin through night vision, cataloging the peaceful rhythm of a father and daughter trying to survive. Then the assault team had materialized from the forest like ghosts with guns, and his orders from Victoria, observe only, don't engage, had collided with the reality of watching an 8-year-old girl get caught in a firefight. He'd broken protocol, fired the first shot at a flashlight beam, not to kill, but to disrupt, to throw chaos into what had been a coordinated attack. The hunters had scattered exactly as he'd hoped, but now they knew there was a third party in play, which meant the tactical situation had just become exponentially more complicated. His phone buzzed in his pocket, Victoria's number. "I heard shots. What's happening?" Ryan kept his voice low, eyes never leaving the scope as he tracked movement through the trees. Sullivan's location was compromised. Armed team, at least 4, professional-grade equipment. They forced him to run. I'm providing cover fire. Victoria's sharp intake of breath carried clearly through the speaker. "You were supposed to observe only." Observe them murder a child? That wasn't the mission. Silence stretched between them, filled with the weight of decisions made and consequences pending. Where is Sullivan now? Heading northeast toward Eagle's Peak. He's carrying the girl, moving fast, but they can't maintain that pace. The hunters are regrouping. Can you reach him? Ryan calculated distances, terrain, his own physical limits. Maybe. If I break cover now, move hard, I might intercept them before the assault team recovers. But that means leaving overwatch position. Do it. Get to them. Protect them. I'm coming. Victoria, you're 3 hours away. 2 if I drive like I'm trying to kill someone. Keep him alive until I get there. The line went dead. Ryan broke down his rifle in 40 seconds flat, strapped it to his pack, and started down the ridge at a controlled run. The forest at night was a maze of obstacles that could snap ankles or crack skulls, but Delta Force training had prepared him for exactly this, moving fast through hostile terrain with incomplete information and lives on the line. He'd tracked Sullivan's path easily enough in daylight, reading the disturbed leaves and broken twigs. Now he relied on memory and occasional glimpses of flashlight beams marking where the hunters had gone. The tactical picture assembled itself in his mind. Sullivan was heading for defensible high ground, standard military doctrine. The assault team would regroup and pursue, but they'd be cautious now, knowing someone with a rifle had them zeroed. Meanwhile, Ryan needed to reach Sullivan before the man shot him on sight, because a scared veteran with a hunting rifle wouldn't stop to ask questions. He keyed his throat mic, military hardware that shouldn't exist in civilian hands, but did if you knew where to look. "Sullivan, if you can hear me, I'm Ryan Cole. I work for Victoria Brennan. I'm the one who fired those shots. I'm coming to help you." Broadcasting his position to anyone listening, but better than getting shot by friendly fire. The terrain steepened. Ryan shifted from running to climbing, using hands and feet to navigate slopes that wanted to shed him like water off glass. His quads burned. Sweat froze on his face in the November cold. Above him, perhaps a mile distant, the silhouette of Eagle's Peak fire tower stood black against the stars. Mark heard the voice through the trees, and every instinct told him it was a trap. "Sullivan, if you can hear me, I'm Ryan Cole. I work for Victoria Brennan. I'm the one who fired those shots. I'm coming to help you." Victoria Brennan, the woman from the restaurant, The woman whose father he'd saved 19 years ago. The woman who'd protected his identity from police. Either she'd sent someone to help, or someone had learned to use her name as bait. Mark kept climbing, the Winchester ready, trusting nothing until he could see proof with his own eyes. Zoe had stopped talking, saving her breath for the nightmare of vertical movement. Her fingers dug into his shoulders, holding on with desperate strength. Each step felt like moving through concrete. The trail opened onto a small clearing, 10 feet of relatively flat ground before the next switchback. Mark set Zoe down, giving them both 30 seconds to breathe. He pulled out the water bottle, let her drink, then took a pull himself.
His hands shook from exertion and adrenaline. "How much farther?" Her voice came out as a wheeze, the strain pushing her cardiovascular system to its limits. "Maybe a mile. Can you keep going?" She nodded, but the nod turned into a cough that bent her double. Mark's hand went to her back, feeling her heart racing under his palm. Too fast, dangerously fast. He needed to stop, give her the medication, let her rest. But stopping meant getting caught. No good choices, only less terrible ones. "Just a little more, baby. You're the bravest person I know." Movement in the trees below. A figure climbing fast, alone, no flashlight. Mark brought the Winchester up, finger on the trigger, waiting. The figure emerged into moonlight and froze, hands visible and empty. "Don't shoot. Ryan Cole. Victoria sent me." 45, Caucasian, the kind of build that came from decades of physical discipline. He wore dark hiking gear, a rifle strapped to his pack, and moved with the economy of someone who'd done this before. Mark kept the Winchester trained on center mass. "Prove it." Ryan slowly reached into his jacket and pulled out a phone, holding it screen forward. The display showed a photo. 2 halves of a silver dollar laid side by side, the break line matching perfectly. Mark's breath caught. His half. The one he'd lost at the restaurant. "Victoria figured out who you were. She's been searching for you since that night. Not to hurt you, to help you. James Brennan told her about Ramadi before he died. Told her the family owed you everything. I don't want anything from her. Maybe not. But right now, you need something. Protection from whoever's hunting you. And I can provide that." The sound of engines starting up again echoed from below. The assault team had regrouped, was repositioning. They'd be coming soon, and this time, they'd be ready for resistance. Mark made another terrible choice. "Can you shoot?" "Delta Force, 12 years, yes." "Then we move together. You take rear guard. Anything that follows us up this mountain, you stop it." Ryan nodded once, professional acknowledgement between soldiers who understood the stakes. They started climbing again, this time as a 3-person unit. Ryan moved behind them, rifle unslung, covering their retreat with the calm efficiency of someone who'd done overwatch for extraction teams in worse situations. The trail deteriorated into barely controlled falling upward. Zoe's breathing turned ragged, each inhale a struggle. Mark felt her weight increasing as her strength failed. The 8-year-old body pushed past its limits. "Daddy, I can't." "Yes, you can. Just a little more." A lie and a prayer wrapped together. Ryan's voice came from behind, barely audible. "Contact! 200 yards, 4 targets, moving in pursuit." "Can you slow them?" "Negative. Firing now risks giving away our exact position. Better to let them commit to the climb, then hit them at a choke point." Military logic, sound tactics, also meant they had to keep running until Ryan found terrain that favored defense. The trail turned sharply, hugging a cliff face that dropped away into darkness. One slip, and they'd fall 60 feet onto rocks that wouldn't care about intentions or debts or dying father's wishes. Mark pressed against the rock wall, inching forward, one hand gripping an exposed root, the other holding Zoe against his chest. She'd stopped trying to walk, just clung to him like a baby koala, every ounce of fight drained from her small frame. Behind them, Ryan moved with spider-like confidence, finding handholds that shouldn't exist, never looking down. The cliff face opened back onto trail, this time with a sharp switchback that doubled back on itself. Ryan stopped, studying the terrain with professional assessment.
Here, this is where we make a stand. The switchback created a natural funnel. Anyone coming up would have to expose themselves for 3 seconds while navigating the turn. 3 seconds was an eternity to a trained sniper. Mark set Zoe down behind a boulder, pulled out the emergency pack, found the orange prescription bottle. 2 pills left. He gave her one with water, watched her swallow it, prayed it would be enough. Stay behind this rock. No matter what you hear, stay hidden. Her eyes were glassy with exhaustion, but she understood. She curled into a ball behind the granite, making herself small. Mark took position 10 yards up trail with the Winchester, covering the approach. Ryan settled into a prone position at the switchback, rifle aimed down trail, scope adjusted for night shooting. How many rounds you have? 8 in the magazine, box of 20 in the pack. I've got 12. Let's hope we don't need them all. The wait stretched into minutes that felt like hours. Mark's heartbeat counted time in his temples. Below, flashlight beams appeared and disappeared as the assault team navigated the lower trail. Then voices drifted up, carried on cold wind. 2 men, speaking in clipped sentences. Lost the heat signature. Must be close, they can't move fast with the kid. Creed wants them alive, remember? Creed. A name that meant nothing to Mark, but clearly meant something to whoever had hired these people. The flashlights grew brighter. Footsteps on rock, labored breathing, the sounds of men pushing their physical limits in pursuit. Ryan's voice barely reached Mark's ears. 4 targets, armed, professional posture. On my mark, you take the trail, I take the switchback. Mark's finger found the trigger. Every lesson from Army marksmanship training clicked into place. Breathing, trigger control, sight picture. The difference was that in training, the targets didn't have families waiting at home. The first hunter appeared around the switchback, weapon up, sweeping for targets. Ryan's rifle coughed once, a suppressed shot that hit the man in the shoulder, spinning him backward. Not lethal. A message. The remaining 3 scattered, diving for cover, return fire erupting in a cascade of muzzle flashes. Rounds sparked off rock, thudded into trees, filled the night with the particular terror of bullets passing close. Mark fired twice, careful shots aimed at positions, not people. Suppressing fire. He'd killed in combat before, in Iraq and Afghanistan, when the situation demanded it. But this wasn't war, and these weren't enemy combatants, just contractors doing a job for someone with deep pockets. The philosophical distinction mattered, until it didn't. One of the hunters tried to advance up the trail, using shadows for cover. Mark put around 6 inches from the man's head, and he retreated fast, swearing viciously. They're pinned. Ryan's voice carried certainty, but not for long. They'll try to flank or wait us out. Neither option favored Mark. Wait, and Zoe's condition would deteriorate. Try to disengage, and they'd be exposed on the trail with no cover. Then a new sound cut through the gunfire. Helicopter rotors, distant but approaching fast. Mark's stomach dropped. If the assault team had air support, the tactical situation just became impossible. But Ryan was smiling, a grim expression visible in the moonlight. That's not theirs. That's ours. Victoria Brennan had never personally piloted a helicopter, but she'd paid for enough emergency medical transport to know exactly which company to call when she needed one in the middle of the night, with no questions asked. The pilot, a grizzled Vietnam veteran who'd seen stranger things than a CEO demanding immediate transport to a mountain in the Adirondacks, had taken her money and pointed the aircraft north.
Now they thundered through the night sky, following Ryan's GPS coordinates, the helicopter's searchlight sweeping the forest below like the finger of an angry god. "You're sure you want to do this, ma'am? Those are gunshots down there. Multiple parties engaged." Victoria stared through the windscreen at the darkness rushing past. "Someone down there saved my father's life 19 years ago. Now he needs mine. Get me on that mountain." The pilot keyed his radio, broadcasting on emergency frequencies. "All parties on Eagles Peak. This is November 7-7 Quebec. Medical evacuation helicopter inbound. Ceasefire or we're calling in state police." Below, the gunfire stuttered, then stopped. Victoria could see flashlight beams scattering, the assault team breaking off, melting back into the forest. Confronting a lone veteran was one thing. Engaging with witnesses in the sky broadcasting their position to authorities was another. The helicopter circled, searchlight finding the fire tower at the peak. A flat area below it, barely large enough for landing, materialized in the beam. "That's going to be tight, ma'am." "You flew medevac in Da Nang? You've done tighter." The pilot grinned, showing teeth. "Yes, ma'am." The aircraft dropped like a controlled fall, rotors kicking up a hurricane of leaves and dirt as they settled onto the improvised landing zone. Victoria unbuckled before the skids touched earth, jumping out while the blades still spun. Ryan materialized from the trees, rifle slung, moving with the casual urgency of someone used to hot extractions. "Sullivan's 30 yards up, behind the boulder with his daughter. He's armed, and he doesn't trust easily." "I'm not here to hurt him." "Then lead with that. He's got a finger on the trigger and about 3 seconds of patience left." Victoria started up the trail, hands visible and empty. The searchlight from the helicopter illuminated her path, turning the forest into a stage set of harsh shadows and brilliant light. She found them exactly where Ryan had indicated. Mark Sullivan crouched behind granite with a Winchester rifle, and a small girl curled against the rock, her face pale in the artificial glare. Mark didn't lower the weapon. Victoria stopped 10 feet away, making no sudden movements. "Marcus Sullivan. My name is Victoria Brennan. I think you knew my father."
"Stay back." "James Brennan, Army Colonel, Ramadi, 2006. You saved his life when his Humvee hit an IED. He gave you half of a silver dollar and told you our family's debt was yours to collect." Mark's jaw tightened, the rifle not wavering. "I don't want your money. I don't want anything from you. Just leave us alone." "I wish I could, but the men hunting you aren't going to stop. They work for someone who has resources and patience and no reason to quit. You can keep running, or you can let me help." "Why would you help me?" The question hung between them, weighted with all the unspoken history of debts and honor and promises made by dying men. Victoria took a slow breath, choosing her words with care. "Because 19 years ago, you ran through enemy fire to save a stranger. Because my father spent the rest of his life trying to find you so he could say thank you. Because you stepped between me and 3 armed men with nothing but kitchen equipment and moral certainty. Because your daughter deserves better than living in fear." She paused, meeting his eyes directly. "Because doing the right thing shouldn't cost you everything." The Winchester's barrel dropped an inch, not lowered completely, but no longer pointed at center mass. "Who are those men? Why are they hunting us?" "His name is Ronan Ashworth, corporate raider, no conscience, and currently my business rival. He's trying to acquire a defense technology company that I'm also bidding for. $800 million at stake. You became leverage when you saved my life." "I'm a dishwasher. How am I leverage?" "You're not just a dishwasher, Mr. Sullivan. You're a decorated Army Ranger with a Silver Star for valor. You're the man who saved James Brennan's life. And you're someone I clearly value enough to send resources after. That makes you a pressure point Ronan can exploit." Mark processed this,
his tactical mind running scenarios. Victoria could see him calculating, weighing, trying to find the trap in her words. Behind them, Zoe coughed, a wet, rattling sound that turned Victoria's blood cold. Your daughter needs a hospital. She needs her medication. Heart condition. We ran out. Then let me get her to a hospital. Let me get you both somewhere safe. Then we figure out how to end this. You can't end this. Men like Ashworth don't stop until they win. Victoria smiled, and there was steel in it. Then we make sure he doesn't win. You're not the only one who knows how to fight, Mr. Sullivan. I just use different weapons. Mark looked at his daughter, then back at Victoria. The calculation behind his eyes resolved into something that looked almost like surrender. If anything happens to her, nothing will happen to her. You have my word. Your word and $4 gets me coffee. Then take this instead. Victoria reached into her jacket slowly, pulled out a small velvet bag, and tossed it to Mark. He caught it one-handed, opened it, and went very still. Inside lay his half of the silver dollar, polished and mounted on a new chain. My father's half is in my office safe. When this is over, we'll put them back together. But right now, that's proof that I'm not your enemy. I'm the only ally you have. Mark stared at the pendant, his expression unreadable. Then he slipped it around his neck, the weight settling against his chest like an old friend returning home. Okay, we go with you. But the moment I think you're playing me, I disappear and you never find us again. Fair enough. Ryan appeared from the shadows, his timing perfect as always. We need to move. The assault team broke off, but they'll regroup once we're airborne. And I'm willing to bet they called for reinforcements. The four of them made their way to the helicopter, Mark carrying Zoe, Ryan covering their retreat, Victoria in the lead. The pilot had kept the rotors spinning, ready for immediate departure. They piled in, Mark buckling Zoe into a seat, Ryan taking position by the open door with his rifle. Victoria claimed the co-pilot seat, pulling on a headset. Get us to Albany Med. Fastest route. The pilot nodded, pulled pitch, and the helicopter leaped into the sky. The forest fell away below them, the fire tower shrinking to a toy, the entire mountain becoming just another shadow in the vast darkness of the Adirondacks. Mark held Zoe close, her head against his chest, her breathing shallow. His hand found the pendant around his neck, fingers tracing the worn edges of the silver. Victoria turned in her seat, meeting his eyes. We're going to fix this. All of it. But I need you to trust me. I don't trust anyone. Then trust that I have as much to lose as you do. Ronan doesn't get to win. Not this time. The helicopter banked south, eating up miles, carrying them toward hospitals and safety, and a reckoning that was building like a storm on the horizon. Below, in the forest they'd left behind, flashlight beams reconverged on the abandoned cabin. Men spoke into radios, reporting failure, requesting new orders. And in a glass tower in Manhattan, Ronan Ashworth received those reports with the calm satisfaction of someone who knew that every move his opponent made brought them closer to checkmate. The game wasn't over. It was just beginning. The emergency room at Albany Medical Center smelled like disinfectant and desperation. Mark carried Zoe through the automatic doors, Ryan flanking them, Victoria on her phone coordinating with hospital administration in a tone that suggested refusal wasn't an option. A nurse met them with a wheelchair, but Mark wouldn't release his daughter until they reached the examination room. He finally set her down on the paper-covered table, her small body looking impossibly fragile under the fluorescent lights. She has atrial septal defect, takes beta blockers daily. Missed doses, high stress, physical exertion. Her heart's been pushed past safe limits. The attending physician, a woman in her 50s with kind eyes and efficient hands,
nodded, already checking Zoe's pulse, her blood pressure, listening to her heart through a stethoscope. Tachycardia, elevated BP, signs of cardiac stress. We need an EKG, full blood panel, and chest x-ray. Dad, you did good getting her here.
Will she be okay? We're going to stabilize her, get her medication levels back where they need to be. She'll be monitored overnight, maybe longer, but yes, she should be fine. Should be. The two words carried the weight of every terrible possibility. Mark stepped back as the medical team swarmed around Zoe, connecting monitors, inserting an IV line, moving with choreographed precision. He watched his daughter disappear into a nest of tubes and wires and felt his own heart trying to climb out of his chest. Victoria touched his shoulder, gentle but present. Let them work. She's in good hands. This is my fault. I ran. I thought I could protect her by keeping her away from everything. Instead, I almost... He couldn't finish the sentence. You protected her from immediate danger. That's not failure. That's being a father. Now let me protect you both from the danger that's coming. Mark looked at her, really looked at her for the first time since the restaurant. Victoria Brennan, CEO, billionaire, daughter of the man he'd saved. She wore jeans and a hiking jacket splattered with mud, her hair pulled back in a practical ponytail, exhaustion written in the lines around her eyes. Not the polished executive from the restaurant, but someone who'd driven through the night and commanded helicopters to reach them. Why are you doing this? I told you. My father's debt. No, that's the reason you tell yourself. But there's something else. What is it? Victoria's expression shifted, vulnerability flashing through her armor for just a moment. My father died owing you everything, and I never got the chance to thank you. He talked about you, about Doc, the medic who ran through hell to save him. For 6 years, I've carried that story, wondering who you were, whether you survived the war, if you ever knew how much your actions mattered. And then you appeared in my restaurant, saved my life, and disappeared again. I'm not letting that happen twice. The honesty of it hit Mark harder than any punch Vince had thrown. I'm not a hero. I just did my job. Your job was to provide medical care. You went above and beyond into something else entirely. That's the definition of heroism, whether you accept it or not. A nurse emerged from the examination room, interrupting the moment. Mr. Sullivan, your daughter is stable. We're moving her to pediatric cardiac observation. You can see her once she's settled. Relief flooded through Mark's system, turning his legs liquid. He sat down hard on a waiting room chair, head in his hands. Ryan appeared with coffee and paper cups, the universal language of people who'd spent too many hours waiting in hospitals. Doc says she'll be monitored for 48 hours minimum. Hospital security has been briefed. No one gets near her room without ID verification and your approval. I've also got 2 of my people stationed outside. Your people? Former military, now private security. They work for me, which means they work for Victoria, which means they protect what we protect. Your daughter qualifies. Mark accepted the coffee, let the heat of it ground him in the present moment. Ashworth won't stop. He'll find another angle, another pressure point. Then we remove him as a threat. Victoria's voice carried absolute certainty. I have lawyers, investigators, federal contacts. If Ronan Ashworth hired those men, we'll prove it. And then we'll bury him. Rich people don't go to jail. They do when they kidnap children and attempt murder. Money buys lawyers, not immunity. Ryan's phone buzzed. He glanced at the screen, his expression tightening. We have a problem. Hospital security just flagged someone in the lobby. Man matching the description of one of the assault team members from the mountain. He's asking about recent admissions, pediatric cases.
Mark was on his feet instantly, every protective instinct overriding exhaustion.
Where is he? Ground floor, near admissions. Security is watching but hasn't approached. I'm going down there.
Mark, wait! Victoria started, but he was already moving. Ryan caught up to him at the elevator, not trying to stop him, but clearly planning to provide backup. This is a hospital. We can't start a firefight here. I'm not planning to fight. I'm planning to send a message. The elevator descended in agonizing slowness. When the doors opened, Mark scanned the lobby systematically. There, a man in dark clothing, casual but alert, eyes tracking everyone who passed. One of the hunters from the mountain, no question. Mark walked straight toward him, not fast enough to alarm, but with clear intent. The man saw him coming, recognition flashing across his face, hand moving toward his waistband where a weapon probably waited. Mark closed the distance, got inside the man's reach, and spoke quietly enough that no one else could hear. You go back to whoever sent you and deliver this message. Touch my daughter, and I will end you. Not hurt you, not wound you. End you. And when you're gone, I'll end everyone connected to this. Your employer, your team, everyone who thought putting a child in danger was acceptable. The man's hand had stopped halfway to his weapon, frozen by the absolute certainty in Mark's voice. You don't know who you're dealing with. Former Ranger, 3 combat deployments, Silver Star for actions under fire. I know exactly what I'm capable of. Do you? The man swallowed, some calculation running behind his eyes, risk versus reward, paycheck versus survival. I'm just doing a job. Find a different job. This one will kill you. Mark held his gaze for 3 more seconds, then turned and walked away. Behind him, he heard the man's footsteps heading for the exit, fast and getting faster. Ryan caught up at the elevator, a slight smile on his face. That was either incredibly brave or incredibly stupid. Probably both. But he'll report back to Ashworth, and Ashworth will know we're not running anymore. That might make him escalate. Good. I'd rather fight than hide. They returned to the pediatric floor where Victoria waited, arms crossed, expression hovering between impressed and concerned. The man left, security confirmed. He got into a black SUV in the parking garage and drove away. He'll be back, with more people, better plans. Then we'll be ready. Victoria's phone buzzed and she glanced at it, her expression shifting. My legal team just sent me something. Preliminary investigation into Ronan Ashworth's recent activities. She pulled up a document, scrolled through pages of dense legal text. They found paper trails. LLC shell companies used to hire private military contractors. One of those companies processed payments 3 days ago, same day as the restaurant incident. And another payment went through yesterday. Can you prove Ashworth controls those companies? Not yet, but my people are good at following money. Give them 48 hours. Mark stared at the document, watching justice move at the speed of lawyers and bureaucracy while his daughter lay in a hospital bed with monitors tracking her heartbeat. 48 hours is too long. It's the system we have. Then the system is broken. Victoria met his eyes, and something passed between them, an understanding that sometimes official channels moved too slowly, that sometimes the right thing required operating outside comfortable boundaries. What are you suggesting? That we stop playing defense. Find out where Ashworth is, what he's planning. Hit him before he hits us again. That's not legal. Neither is kidnapping children. Ryan cleared his throat, drawing their attention. I might have an alternative approach. Ashworth operates out of a building in Midtown, 42nd floor. High security, but nothing military grade. If someone wanted to have a conversation with him, a private, unrecorded conversation about his recent business activities. It could be arranged. You're talking about breaking into his office. I'm talking about accessing it through unconventional means. Breaking implies property damage. I prefer subtlety. Mark looked at Ryan, seeing past the professional security consultant to the Delta Force operator underneath. Can you get me in there? I can get us in there. But this is Victoria's call. They both turned to her. Victoria Brennan, who'd built her reputation on playing by rules and winning through superior strategy, who'd inherited an empire and expanded it through legitimate business practices and ethical conduct. She took a long moment before answering, weighing consequences against necessity. Do it. But no violence unless absolutely necessary, and no evidence trail that leads back to us. Understood. A nurse appeared in the hallway, gesturing toward Zoe's room. Mr. Sullivan, your daughter is asking for you. Mark moved toward the room, then paused, looking back at Victoria and Ryan. Thank you for all of this. I know I don't trust easily, and I'm probably going to regret this decision. But right now, you're the only people standing between my daughter and the monsters. So thank you. Victoria's expression softened. Thank your father when you see him. He's the one who gave me the example I'm trying to live up to. Mark entered Zoe's room and found her awake, dwarfed by the hospital bed, connected to machines that beeped rhythmically. She looked so small, so vulnerable, every parental fear made manifest in tubes and wires. Hey, baby. How are you feeling? Tired. The medicine makes me sleepy. He pulled a chair close, took her hand carefully around the IV line. You're going to stay here for a couple days. Get strong again. I'll be right here the whole time. Promise? Promise. She closed her eyes, the medication pulling her back towards sleep. Mark watched her breathe, counting each inhale and exhale like prayers. Outside the room, through the window in the door, he could see Victoria and Ryan talking in low tones, planning their next move. Two people he'd known for less than 8 hours, now the foundation of whatever came next. His hand found the pendant around his neck, the silver dollar warm against his skin. James Brennan had given him this 19 years ago with a promise that saving a life meant something, that debts mattered, that honor existed even in the midst of chaos. Now that promise was being repaid by the man's daughter, and Mark was caught between gratitude and terror at what accepting that help might cost. The monitors beeped their steady rhythm. Zoe's chest rose and fell. Outside the window, dawn was breaking over Albany, painting the world in shades of gold and red. Somewhere in Manhattan, Ronan Ashworth was receiving reports and making plans. The war was coming. The only question was, who would survive it? Ronan Ashworth's office existed in that realm where architecture became statement, floor-to-ceiling glass on 3 sides, Manhattan spread below like a map of conquered territory, furniture chosen for dominance rather than comfort. He stood at the eastern window, watching dawn break over the city, phone pressed to his ear, listening to failure dressed up as tactical setback. A helicopter. Victoria Brennan called in a medical evacuation helicopter with witnesses and radio broadcasts. My team had no choice but to disengage. Creed's voice carried no emotion, just facts delivered like ammunition casings hitting concrete. Where are they now? Albany Medical Center. The girl's in pediatric cardiac observation. Father hasn't left her side. Brennan's people have established a security perimeter. Hospital staff, private contractors, the works. Ronan's reflection in the glass smiled without warmth. Then we shift tactics. Hospitals have protocols, regulations, oversight. Use that. File complaints about unauthorized security. Demand patient privacy reviews. tie them up in bureaucracy while we move to phase 2. Which is? Make Sullivan come to me. He's proven he'll sacrifice anything to protect his daughter. Let's test the limits of anything. Ronan ended the call and pulled up a different file on his tablet. Comprehensive background on Marcus Sullivan, assembled over 72 hours of intensive investigation. Former Ranger, combat medic, Silver Star recipient. Widower raising a daughter alone. No criminal record, no debts, no visible weaknesses except the obvious one. Everyone who loves someone is vulnerable.
The trick was applying pressure at exactly the right point. His desk phone buzzed, the internal line reserved for his executive assistant. Mr. Ashworth, Agent Sarah Mitchell from the FBI is here. She doesn't have an appointment. FBI. Interesting timing. Send her in. Agent Mitchell entered with the careful neutrality of someone trained to read rooms and find lies. 40 years old, Caucasian, wearing a charcoal pantsuit and an expression that suggested she'd been doing this job long enough to know when people were about to lie to her face. Mr. Ashworth, thank you for seeing me without notice. My door is always open to federal law enforcement. Please, sit. She remained standing, pulling out a badge to establish authority, then a small notepad. I'm investigating an incident at a restaurant called Aria 5 days ago. 3 men attempted to assault Victoria Brennan, CEO of Brennan Industries.
Those men have been identified as contractors working for a security firm called Sentinel Group. That firm is owned by an LLC that traces back to 12 shell companies. We're working on untangling those companies now. Ronan's expression didn't shift, corporate mask firmly in place. That sounds like a complex investigation. How does it concern me? Does the name Marcus Sullivan mean anything to you? Should it? He's the man who stopped the assault at Aria. Former Army Ranger, decorated veteran, currently living under the radar with his 8-year-old daughter. Since that night, there have been 2 additional attempts on his life, one at a cabin in the Adirondacks, another during a pursuit to Eagles Peak. The contractors involved match the profile of Sentinel Group personnel. Ronan walked to his desk, sat down, projected the calm of someone with nothing to hide. Agent Mitchell, I appreciate the FBI's diligence, but I have no connection to any assault. I'm a financier, not a thug. If you have evidence linking me to criminal activity, I assume you'd be arresting me rather than asking questions. We're building that evidence. Financial records, contractor testimony, digital footprints. It's only a matter of time. Then I'll wait patiently for that time to arrive. In the meantime, unless you have a warrant, I believe our conversation is concluded. Mitchell held his gaze for 3 seconds longer than comfortable, an interrogation technique meant to prompt defensive babbling. Ronan had seen it before, deployed it himself in hostile negotiations. He said nothing. Finally, she tucked the notepad away. We'll be in touch, Mr. Ashworth. Have your lawyer ready. After she left, Ronan stood and returned to the window. FBI involvement complicated things, but didn't change the fundamental equation. Victoria had resources, he had resources. She had legal leverage, he had operational flexibility. The question was, who would exhaust their options first? His phone buzzed again. Different number, encrypted. The situation at Albany Med is contained for now, but Sullivan made contact with one of our people in the hospital lobby. Delivered a threat. What kind of threat? The credible kind. Former military, combat experience. He knows what he's capable of and isn't afraid to deploy it. My assessment? He's transitioned from flight to fight mode. That makes him more dangerous. Ronan processed this, tactical gears turning. Then we give him a target he can't resist. Something that forces him out of that hospital and into terrain we control. How quickly can you assemble a full team? 12 hours. But a hospital infiltration is high risk, high exposure. I'm not talking about the hospital. I'm talking about making Sullivan believe his daughter is only safe if he eliminates me personally. Pride and desperation. The two forces that make smart people stupid. Ronan pulled up another file, this one containing Victoria Brennan's schedule for the next week. Public appearances, board meetings, charity galas. One entry stood out, a technology conference in 2 days where she'd be presenting on defense AI applications. Public venue, security protocols, predictable timing. Perfect bait. Mark sat in the hospital room watching Zoe sleep for the 16th consecutive hour, monitoring the steady rhythm of machines that kept turning terror into data points. Heart rate stable, blood pressure normalizing, oxygen saturation good. Numbers that meant his daughter would live. Victoria appeared in the doorway, moving quietly, carrying 2 cups of coffee that smelled expensive and necessary. Ryan's people are rotating shifts. You should sleep. Can't. Won't, you mean? Mark accepted the coffee, grateful for the ritual of holding something warm. Same difference. Every time I close my eyes, I see her on that mountain, struggling to breathe, and I know it's my fault. I ran instead of fighting, put her through hell to avoid a confrontation that's coming anyway. Victoria pulled a chair close, sitting with the careful posture of someone who'd spent too many hours in similar vigils. My father used to say that running toward danger and running from it sometimes look identical from the outside. The difference is internal, whether you're moving out of fear or calculation. Which was I doing? Both. And that's human. You're not a machine, Marcus. You're a father trying to protect his child with incomplete information and impossible choices. The words should have been comforting. Instead, they highlighted the impossibility of the situation, that no amount of tactical training or combat experience prepared someone for the specific terror of watching their child suffer. I met with my legal team this morning, Victoria continued, shifting to business mode. We've established a paper trail linking Sentinel Group to 3 of Ashworth's shell companies. Not enough for criminal charges yet, but enough to file civil suits. We're also preparing federal complaints: kidnapping, attempted murder, conspiracy. How long until those complaints matter? Weeks, maybe months. The system moves slowly. We don't have months. Which is why Ryan is preparing the alternative approach. He's assembled a team, 4 people, all former special operations, completely off book. They're going to access Ashworth's office tonight and obtain evidence we can't get through legal channels. Mark looked at her carefully, seeing past the CEO exterior to something harder underneath. You're risking everything. Your company, your reputation, possibly criminal charges. Why? Because sometimes the right thing and the legal thing aren't the same. And because I watched my father die knowing he had an unpaid debt. I won't make that mistake twice. The weight of that pressed against Mark's chest, the knowledge that his actions 19 years ago had created ripples still moving through the world, binding strangers together in webs of obligation and honor. If this goes wrong, it won't. Ryan's too good. Everyone makes mistakes. Then we'll deal with the consequences, but doing nothing guarantees Ashworth wins. I've built my career on never accepting that outcome. A nurse entered, checked Zoe's vitals, made notes on a tablet, and left with professional efficiency. The interruption broke the moment, pulling them back to the immediate reality of hospital rooms and monitored hearts. Mark's phone buzzed, the disposable one he'd bought in Albany. Unknown number. He almost didn't answer, but instinct made him pick up. Mr. Sullivan, my name is Ronan Ashworth. I believe we have matters to discuss. Every muscle in Mark's body went rigid. Victoria saw the change, her expression sharpening. How did you get this number? I have resources. More importantly, I have information you need. Information about why your daughter is in that hospital bed and how to make sure she stays safe. You're threatening her. I'm offering clarity. The current situation benefits no one. You're trapped in a hospital. I'm under federal investigation, and Victoria Brennan is burning through goodwill trying to protect you. Let's be adults and negotiate." Mark's hand tightened on the phone hard enough to make the plastic creak. "I don't negotiate with people who hunt children." "Then you're a fool. Because the next move I make won't be against you or your daughter. It will be against Victoria. And when she's dead, you'll have to explain to your child why you let pride get in the way of pragmatism." The line went dead. Mark stood so fast his chair fell backward, rage and fear competing for dominance in his nervous system. Victoria was already on her feet, reading his body language. "What did he say?" "He threatened you. Directly. Next move is against you, not Zoe." Victoria's expression didn't change, but something shifted in her eyes. Acknowledgement that the rules had changed again. "When?" He didn't specify, just made it clear he's shifting targets. "Then we move first. Tonight. Ryan's team goes in, we get everything Ashworth has, and we end this before he can execute whatever he's planning." Mark shook his head, tactical brain overriding emotional reaction. "That's what he wants. He's baiting you into exposing yourself. The threat isn't real, it's misdirection. While we're focused on protecting you, he's moving on a different objective entirely." "What objective?" Mark thought through the pieces, trying to assemble strategy from fragments. "He wanted leverage over you. He tried to get it through me and failed. So now he's creating a scenario where you have to choose. Expose yourself to protect me, or let me become collateral damage. Either way, he wins." Victoria pulled out her phone, fingers flying across the screen. "I'm canceling all public appearances for the next week. Board meetings go virtual. Conference presentations get delegated. If he's planning an attack, I'm not giving him a target." "That's surrender. Your business can't function if you're in hiding." "My business can survive temporary disruption. I can't run a company if I'm dead." The logic was sound, but the cost was visible. A woman who'd built her identity on being present and visible, now forced into shadows by a man with money and malice. Ryan appeared in the doorway, his timing suggesting he'd been monitoring the conversation. "We have a problem. Hospital security just flagged suspicious activity in the parking garage. 3 vehicles, occupants matching contractor profiles, setting up observation positions. They're not trying to infiltrate. They're establishing surveillance. Counting exits, timing shift changes, building a pattern for future action." Mark recognized the preparation for what it was. "How long have they been there?" "Unknown. Security only noticed them 20 minutes ago when someone questioned why the same vehicles kept circling without parking." Victoria's phone rang. She glanced at the screen, frowned, and answered. "This is Victoria Brennan." Mark watched her face change, surprise, then anger, then something that looked like fear wearing a professional mask. "I understand." "Yes." "No, that won't be necessary. Thank you for the courtesy." She ended the call, standing motionless for 3 seconds. "That was the conference organizer for the Defense Technology Summit in 2 days. They've received a credible bomb threat specifically mentioning me by name. FBI is involved. Venue is being swept. My appearance has been officially canceled for security reasons." "Ashworth? Who else? He's forcing me out of public life piece by piece. Next it'll be my office, my home, anywhere I might feel safe." Mark looked at Ryan, seeing the same tactical assessment reflected in the man's expression. "He's not trying to kill you. He's trying to make you radioactive. So dangerous to be near that your business partners abandon you. Your board loses confidence. Your leverage in the Ethel Red acquisition evaporates. It's not murder. It's character assassination through manufactured crisis." Victoria sat down heavily, the weight of it finally showing through her armor. "Then I've already lost. Even if we prove he's behind this, the damage is done. Every canceled appearance, every security threat, every federal investigation, it all adds up to a CEO who's become a liability." "Unless we flip it," Mark heard himself saying,
strategy forming as he spoke. He's making you the target because he thinks it gives him leverage. What if we make him the target instead? Force him into a position where he has to defend himself publicly, where his carefully constructed legitimacy comes under scrutiny. How? You're a CEO. You know how to manipulate markets, press, public perception. Do that. Make Ashworth's connection to Sentinel Group public before the FBI does. Force him to respond to accusations instead of making them. Victoria's eyes sharpened, the tactical mind engaging despite exhaustion. That's playing dirty. Once information goes public, it can't be retracted. If we're wrong about any detail, he'll sue us into oblivion. Are you wrong? No. But proof and public accusation are different standards. Then don't make accusations. Ask questions. Why would 3 men attack you at Aria? Why do those men work for a company connected to Ashworth's financial empire? Why is the FBI investigating his business practices? You're not claiming guilt. You're wondering aloud while cameras record. Ryan cleared his throat. That's a bold strategy, also potentially illegal depending on how it's framed. But it would force Ashworth into defensive posture. Hard to execute attacks when you're explaining why you're innocent. Victoria stood, pacing the small room, working through scenarios. I'd need a platform, something public, credible, that Ashworth can't simply dismiss as conspiracy theory. You were supposed to present at a defense technology conference. What if you do it anyway? Different venue, different format, but same audience. Stream it live so he can't claim editing or manipulation. And say what exactly? Mark met her eyes, seeing the decision forming. Tell the truth. All of it. That a man saved your father's life 19 years ago. That same man saved yours 5 days ago. That someone is now hunting him and his daughter. That you've connected the hunters to a business rival who stands to gain if you're eliminated. Don't accuse. Just present facts and let the audience draw conclusions. The plan hung between them, audacious and possibly suicidal. If I do this, there's no going back. Ashworth will escalate. The FBI will have questions. My board will panic. And if you don't, you spend the rest of your life looking over your shoulder while Ashworth takes everything you've built. Victoria pulled out her phone again, this time calling someone who answered immediately. I need a press conference organized. Tomorrow, noon, location to be determined. Full media presence, networks, streams, print. Topic, corporate terrorism and personal safety. Yes, I know it's short notice. Make it happen. She ended the call and looked at Mark. 12 hours. That's how long we have to prepare a case that destroys a billionaire, without getting sued into bankruptcy or arrested for defamation. I've done harder things with less time. In combat, this is different. No, Mark shook his head. This is exactly the same. Identify the target, plan the approach, execute with overwhelming force. Only difference is the weapons we're using. Ryan's phone buzzed. He read the message, his expression tightening. Team's ready for the office infiltration tonight. They're waiting on green light. Victoria considered for 30 seconds, weighing risk against necessity, legal exposure against survival. Green light. But Ryan, make it clear. Evidence only, no property damage, no violence unless lives are at stake. We're not criminals. Understood. After Ryan left to coordinate, Victoria turned back to Mark. You should rest. Zoe's stable, my people are watching her. You've been awake for 36 hours. So have you. I'm running on spite and expensive coffee. You're running on fatherhood and depleted adrenaline. One of those is sustainable, the other isn't. Despite everything, Mark almost smiled. You sound like my grandfather. He used to say that stubbornness was its own kind of fuel. Smart man.
Died at 78, alone in a cabin because he was too stubborn to move to assisted living. Smart doesn't always mean wise. Victoria's expression softened, seeing past the soldier to the man underneath. He raised you, taught you to survive. That's wisdom, even if the packaging was rough. And now you're using those lessons to protect your daughter. He'd be proud. The words hit deeper than expected, opening wounds Mark had thought healed. He'd be ashamed. I'm hiding behind your money and resources instead of handling this myself. He'd understand that sometimes survival means accepting help. That's not weakness. That's tactics. A doctor appeared, clipboard in hand, expression neutral in the way medical professionals used to deliver information without bias. Mr. Sullivan? Zoe's labs came back. Her cardiac function is improving. Medication levels are stable. We'll keep her another 24 hours for observation, but she should be ready for discharge after that. Relief crashed through Mark's system, leaving him unsteady. She's okay? She's okay. Kids are resilient. Her heart is strong. After the doctor left, Mark returned to Zoe's bedside and just breathed. In and out. Present moment. Daughter alive. Victoria watched from the doorway, giving him space but remaining present. Finally, she spoke, voice quiet. When this is over, when Ashworth is dealt with and the threats are neutralized, what will you do? Mark hadn't let himself think that far ahead, too focused on immediate survival to contemplate futures. Go back to being invisible, I guess. Find another city, another job, another life where no one knows our names. Or you could stop running. Accept my job offer. Head of personal security, proper salary, benefits, stability for Zoe. Let her go to real school, make real friends, have a childhood that isn't defined by fear. I'm not qualified to run corporate security. You ran combat medical operations under enemy fire. You've kept yourself and a child alive and hidden for 8 years. You dismantled an assault team with kitchen equipment. I'd say you're overqualified. The offer hung there, tempting and terrifying in equal measure. Why do you want me? You could hire anyone. Because I trust you. And in my world, trust is rarer than competence. You saved my life without knowing who I was or what I could offer in return. That's the kind of person I want watching my back. You barely know me. I know you're a father who'd run through hell to protect his daughter. I know you honored a debt from nearly 2 decades ago by stepping between me and danger. I know you're sitting in a hospital room after being awake for 36 hours because you won't let your child sleep alone. That's enough. Mark looked at Zoe, her small face peaceful in medicated sleep, and tried to imagine a life where they didn't pack emergency bags or memorize escape routes or change addresses every 6 months. If I say yes, and I'm not saying I am, what happens when the next Ronan Ashworth comes along? When protecting you puts Zoe at risk again? Then you do what you're doing now. You make the hard choice, but you make it with resources, support, backup. You don't face it alone. The fantasy of not being alone twisted something in Mark's chest, a hope he'd buried so deep he'd forgotten it existed. Let me think about it. After this is over. Fair enough. But Marcus, when this is over, I'm going to hold you to that consideration. No disappearing into the night. You think you can find me if I run again? Victoria's smile carried steel underneath. I found you once. I'll find you again. And next time, I'll have better handcuffs. Despite everything, the exhaustion, the fear, the weight of impossible decisions, Mark laughed. Brief and genuine. Ryan Cole stood on a rooftop 3 blocks from Ashworth's building, night vision goggles revealing the city in shades of green and black. Below, his team moved into position with the synchronized precision of people who'd done this before in worse places. His earbud crackled with confirmation. Alpha team in position, southeast entrance. Bravo team in position, service elevator. Charlie in the security office, loops running. Ryan had assembled the team from former unit members, people who'd operated together in Fallujah and Kandahar and a dozen other places where the mission requirements exceeded official authorization. They understood that sometimes objectives required flexibility regarding legal frameworks. Tonight's objective? Access Ronan Ashworth's private files and obtain evidence of his connection to the attacks on Marcus Sullivan and Victoria Brennan. Secondary objective: plant surveillance equipment for future monitoring. Tertiary objective: send a message that Victoria Brennan's reach extended beyond boardrooms and legal filings. All teams, we're green. Execute on my mark. Ryan watched through enhanced optics as Alpha Team bypassed the building's street-level security, 2 men in maintenance uniforms carrying toolboxes that contained lockpicks and electronic countermeasures instead of wrenches. They entered through the service entrance, overwhelming the lone guard with surprise and zip ties before he could trigger an alarm. Bravo Team rode the service elevator to the 42nd floor, emerging into executive territory that had been cleared by Charlie's manipulation of security cameras. The loops were good. 15 minutes of empty hallways recorded earlier that evening, now playing on monitors while actual infiltration happened in blind spots. Ryan descended from the rooftop using a maintenance ladder, crossing 3 buildings via rooftop access, reaching a position where he could observe the 42nd floor windows directly. Through his optics, he saw his team entering Ashworth's office, lock defeated in 17 seconds, door closed behind them like they belonged there. Or inside, beginning document sweep. The operation had been planned around one crucial assumption, that Ashworth kept certain files offline, too sensitive for cloud storage or email servers. Old-school executives often maintained paper trails they believed were secure simply because they were analog. Ryan's team photographed everything: filing cabinets, desk contents, hard copies of contracts and communications. Digital forensics would come later. Right now, they just needed evidence that Ashworth wasn't the legitimate businessman he pretended to be. 12 minutes into the operation, the unexpected happened. Movement on 42. Armed security, 2 men, heading toward the office. Ryan's jaw tightened. Building security had already been subdued. These were additional personnel, possibly Ashworth's private contractors. Alpha, Bravo, you have incoming hostiles, 30 seconds to contact. His team acknowledged, without panic, already shifting to extraction mode. They finished photographing the current batch of documents, replaced everything exactly as found, and moved to the office door. The security team reached the door just as Ryan's people exited into the hallway. Professional standoff, 4 armed men in a corridor, none of them officially occupied. One of Ashworth's contractors spoke first, hand near his weapon but not drawing. "This is private property. You need to leave." Ryan's Alpha team leader kept his posture non-threatening but alert. "Just maintenance. Elevator repair. We're done here." "At midnight? Try again." The tension stretched, violence hovering in possibility space. Then Charlie's voice crackled in Ryan's ear. "Building alarm just triggered. Police response incoming. ETA, 4 minutes. The tactical picture shifted. Fighting meant police involvement, meant questions no one could answer well. Alpha team leader made the call. "We're leaving. Stand aside." For 3 seconds, the outcome balanced on a knife edge. Then Ashworth's contractors stepped back, letting Ryan's team pass. Not because they were intimidated, but because escalation benefited no one. Ryan watched his people evacuate via service stairs, moving fast but not running, reaching street level 90 seconds before police units arrived. "All teams clear. Extract to Rally Point Delta." He remained on the rooftop as sirens filled the night, watching police secure the building, interviewing confused security guards who'd been zip-tied in maintenance closets. The operation hadn't been perfect, they'd been detected, but the mission objective was achieved. His phone showed a text from Alpha team leader. "Package secured. 47 documents photographed." Ryan called Victoria's secure line. Mission complete. Evidence obtained. But Ashworth knows we were there. Did you leave anything that traces back to us? No, but he'll guess. Good. Let him guess. Let him know we're not playing defense anymore. Ryan ended the call and started his own extraction, descending into the city's infrastructure, disappearing into the same anonymity that had protected him through a dozen years of operations that officially never happened. Behind him, Ronan Ashworth's building stood illuminated and violated, a fortress that had proven permeable, security that had failed at the crucial moment. Somewhere inside, Ashworth would learn his office had been breached, and he would escalate. Ryan had been counting on exactly that. Victoria stood in her penthouse at 3 a.m, 47 photographs spread across her dining table like evidence at a trial. Ryan's team had delivered exactly what she'd needed: proof of Ashworth's connection to Sentinel Group, payment records, contractor agreements, email printouts discussing asset acquisition and target neutralization. Not enough for criminal charges yet, but more than enough to destroy a reputation. Her PR team had assembled overnight, bleary-eyed but functional, reviewing the material and crafting a narrative that lived in the space between accusation and implication. Her head of communications, a woman named Rachel, who'd been with Victoria since the company's early days, laid out the strategy. We frame it as a question of corporate ethics. You're not accusing Ashworth of attempted murder. You're expressing concern about business practices that appear to involve private military contractors targeting competitors. We cite your personal experience, Marcus Sullivan's story, the FBI investigation that's already public record. Then we let journalists do what they do best: dig until they find the rest. What about legal exposure? Minimal, if we're careful with language. Appears to be connected, rather than is connected. Raises questions about, instead of proves guilt. We're starting a conversation, not making allegations. Victoria studied the documents, seeing the pieces of a puzzle that would end with either Ashworth's destruction or her own. How confident are you this won't backfire? Rachel met her eyes with the exhausted honesty of someone too tired to sugarcoat. 60%. If the evidence holds up and Ashworth can't produce alibis, we win. If there's any gap in our chain of evidence, he buries us in litigation and we spend 5 years in court. Those aren't great odds. They're the odds we have. You wanted to go on offense. This is what offense looks like. Victoria's phone buzzed. Mark, calling from the hospital. Are you planning to sleep at all tonight? Sleep is for people who aren't about to start corporate wars. How's Zoe? Still stable, still beautiful, still the reason I'm letting you put your entire company at risk for us. I'm not doing this for you. I'm doing it because it's right. That's what you tell yourself. But we both know you're honoring your father's promise. Don't pretend it's purely principle. The accuracy of that stung because it was true. Does it matter why, as long as the outcome is correct? No, but honesty matters. At least be honest about your motivations. Victoria looked at the photographs again, each one a piece of ammunition in a war she hadn't started but intended to finish. Fine. I'm doing this because watching my father die with unfinished business taught me that some debts transcend legal frameworks. Because letting Ashworth win means accepting that money and violence trump honor and courage. Because if I don't fight this, I become the kind of person who inherited an empire without earning it. Honest enough? Yeah, that's honest. She heard exhaustion in his voice, the weight of too many impossible choices. Get some sleep, Marcus. Tomorrow we go public, and everything changes. Already has, but I appreciate the optimism. After hanging up, Victoria stood at her penthouse window watching the city sleep, considering all the ways the next 24 hours could collapse into disaster. Behind her, Rachel was still working, refining the press statement, preparing responses to anticipated questions, building the infrastructure for controlled chaos. Victoria, one more thing.
If this goes the way we're planning, Ashworth's going to respond. Hard. You need to be prepared for counterattacks, financial, legal, possibly physical. I know.
Do you? Because I've worked with you for 8 years and I've never seen you do anything like this. You're gambling everything. Company reputation, personal safety, legal standing, on a plan that requires perfect execution. That's not like you. Victoria turned from the window, meeting her friend's concerned gaze. 8 years ago, I inherited a company my father built through integrity and courage. Every day since, I've tried to maintain those standards. But maintaining isn't enough anymore. Sometimes you have to risk everything to prove what you stand for actually means something. And if you lose? Then I lose knowing I fought. That's worth more than winning by surrendering. Rachel nodded slowly, accepting the logic even while questioning the wisdom. Okay. Then let's make sure when you fight smart. Press conference is scheduled for noon, Plaza Hotel conference room. I've confirmed attendance from major networks, financial press, tech media.
We'll have live streaming. Once you start talking, there's no taking it back. Good. I don't want the option of retreat. The hours until dawn passed in preparation, statement refinement, legal review, security coordination. Ryan's team established a perimeter around the Plaza Hotel, screening access points, identifying potential threats. At 10 in the morning, Victoria showered and dressed in what Rachel called armor fashion, a charcoal suit that projected power without aggression, minimal jewelry, hair pulled back to suggest seriousness of purpose. Mark called at 11. I saw the press conference announcement. You're really doing this. No backing out now. Zoe's doctors are clearing her for discharge this afternoon. Ryan's arranged transport to a secure location, property you own upstate, off any public records. We'll be there when you're done. You're not coming to the press conference? My presence makes you a bigger target. Better if I'm somewhere Ashworth can't predict. The logic was sound, but the absence felt like a gap in her defenses. Marcus, when I walk into that room and start dismantling a billionaire's reputation, when the lawsuits start and the FBI asks uncomfortable questions, I need you to promise me something. What? That you won't disappear. That you'll give me a chance to finish what my father started, to repay the debt he couldn't. Silence stretched across the phone line. I promise I won't run before you finish. After that, we'll see. It wasn't the guarantee she wanted, but it was honest. That's all I can ask. At 11:45, Victoria entered the Plaza Hotel through a service entrance, bypassing the lobby where cameras and journalists waited. Rachel walked beside her, tablet displaying real-time social media monitoring. Already the announcement had generated speculation, stock analysts issuing warnings about Brennan Industries facing reputational crisis. Ryan appeared in the corridor, expression grim. Security sweep complete, no threats detected, but Ashworth just arrived at the hotel. He's in the lobby. Victoria's heart skipped. He came? Front door, 3 lawyers, recording devices visible. He's planning to document everything you say for legal purposes. A different person might have retreated. Victoria felt her spine straighten with resolve. Then let's give him something worth documenting. She entered the conference room at exactly noon, cameras swiveling to track her movement, journalists surging forward with questions already forming. Ronan Ashworth sat in the front row, impeccably dressed, surrounded by legal armor, wearing the smile of someone who believed he'd already won. Victoria stepped to the podium and looked directly at him. Ladies and gentlemen, thank you for coming. Today I'm going to tell you a story about honor, debt, and what happens when powerful people decide that violence is an acceptable business strategy. She placed a single photograph on the podium, the picture of 2 halves of a silver dollar. 19 years ago, a young army medic saved my father's life in Ramadi. 5 days ago, that same man saved mine. And now, someone is trying to kill him and his 8-year-old daughter. I'm here to explain why
and to ask one simple question. What kind of society do we want to live in? The room fell silent, every recording device capturing history as it happened. Ronan Ashworth's smile never wavered, but something shifted behind his eyes. The war had begun.